My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. It's Catherine from Willow Healing, and today with me I have Victor Briere. So he is the head of an International Institute of Ayurveda, where he serves as an Ayurvedic doctor and teacher. Victor specializes in Ayurvedic diagnostic techniques and health counseling. He is the author of Pulse Unveiled and will be publishing Ayurveda for Diabetes in 2025. Victor has been a guest on numerous podcasts and published a number of articles on Ayurvedic topics. He is the primary clinician and the chief academic officer of the Academy. As a teacher, he emphasizes one-on-one and small group formats so that students feel prepared to help their clients in highly practical and effective ways. So a big welcome to the show, Victor, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thanks, Catherine. Happy to be here.
So for anyone who has never heard of Ayurvedic medicine and Ayurvedic doctors, maybe that's a great place for us to start because, often if people haven't been familiar with that, they think we're just talking gibberish. So let's go with that.
Yeah, of course. And there are 1,000 ways to answer this question, and I probably answered it 1,000 ways. So let's come up with number 1001 for this podcast.
Yes.
Okay, so Ayurveda is holistic, and that means that the goal of this medicinal system is to keep the whole being healthy, not isolate certain parts and make those parts healthy. And the understanding from an Ayurvedic perspective of all healing is that the system is operating as a functional whole. So that means that your liver is not working in isolation, your kidneys aren't working in isolation, and something upstream or downstream can be affecting anything else in the body at any time. So oftentimes an ailment, while it might manifest in a certain part of the body, the causes are actually in a different part of the body, and then through a chain of effects, you get the manifestation somewhere else, on your arm, on your leg, in your eyes, wherever it is.
Yeah.
So Ayurveda wants to hunt down the causes, plural, because there are almost always more than one, and deal with the causes so that the body can function holistically.
Yeah, and I like that, but it's like looking at the system as a whole because so often we've been conditioned to believe that, oh, this is the symptom, I'm just going to have something to mask that symptom rather than actually looking what might be creating that symptom in your body and causing that imbalance, which is, making your arm hurt or making you feel really sluggish or, giving you a headache.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what an Ayurvedic doctor focuses on all the time. So even though, of course, we want to address symptoms because they're very painful, uncomfortable, whatever it is, horrible, that simultaneously we're looking for the reason those symptoms exist. And those reasons are not just oh, you lack omega-3s or whatnot. They're buried in the lifestyle, they're buried in the diet, they're buried in sleep patterns. And Ayurveda believes that all disease has a psychosomatic origin, meaning that there is a mental component. And if any of your listeners are hip to all the quote-unquote modern research, which actually has been known for a very long time, your mental patterns dramatically influence your physical patterns and vice versa. So there's a constant interplay between what we call the mind and what we call the body. And in that communication, a lot of pathology develops. So we have to address stress levels, not just stress, but how happy someone is as well, because being a neutral kind of stoic robot type is not healthy either.
Yeah.
And that those are very simple terms that reflect very complex life dynamics. So we got to dig into what's going on in someone's life so that they can put their physiology in a position to heal.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you don't take away the underlying like stressor that's causing the whole system to collapse in the first place, then it's almost like you are putting a band-aid on because you're constantly repairing, but you're not taking away what's causing the stress to spike or causing that unhappiness or causing that mindset of unworthiness, which can often then, manifest in other places too.
Yeah, definitely. And the people might be thinking at this point, well, come on, I can't change, I can't be this like constantly positive person, and that's definitely not
No.
what we promote. Actually, a certain amount of stress and a range of emotional experience is healthy for the body, even what's quote unquote called the negative emotions like anger, sadness, grief. But we all have a threshold. And when we cross that threshold and there's too much of that, then the body can't compensate and starts to fall ill in whatever way it's going to fall ill. So the goal isn't to perfect, our emotional state and be happy all the time. It's to organize our life in such a way where we move through stressful situations gracefully. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And it's not that, stress is a bad thing. It's when it's too much stress. And I know from my background that, I owned a company and I was in chronic stress all the time. And I was basically surviving and just keeping my head above water. And then that was affecting my adrenals. It was affecting my weight. It was affecting, my sleep, panic attacks, anxiety, because it had just that flow on effect because it was beyond my threshold. So I fully understand what you're talking about, Victor, when you say that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that threshold that's important, even when it comes to things like diet and sleep. So, like I said a minute ago, and like you said, we are built to tolerate a certain amount of hardship, and actually that can make us a lot tougher. Like just think exercise, for example, right? You intentionally stress out your body in certain ways, and then it gets stronger. And so when we look at like this threshold effect with maybe food or something like that, a lot of times, with the exception of an extreme allergy like a peanut allergy or something like that, it's not an individual food causing someone's problem. It's a combination of foods that share qualities. And then that's mistaken for an individual food. So let's say, I have a sensitive GI tract and I have distress there. And, yesterday I ate something spicy. I ate a chili pepper.
Yeah.
And so now I say, oh, I can't eat chili peppers because my body doesn't agree with them. That's probably not what's going on. Or, these days, gluten intolerance. It's actually probably much more of a holistic issue that deals with thresholds of a combination of things you are eating that results in a sensitivity to a certain food group or a certain food that has certain qualities. And if you were to eat other foods of those same qualities, you would have the same problems.
Yeah.
So in our modern era, we kind of obsess over pinning our problems on one or two things. And that makes sense because it would be nice if we could just say, oh, all I have to do is eliminate this one thing and I can do everything else I was doing before. But fortunately or unfortunately, that typically isn't the case. So, so Ayurveda definitely takes a stance of kind of revamping the whole thing from the ground up in order to produce a state of vitality or health.
Yeah, and I can think of a perfect example when you were saying that with like the food, like a food thing, for example. So for me, I couldn't digest meat properly for years. And so I just went vegetarian because it was easier at the time. And it was just essentially all the stress that I was in pretty much drained all my digestive fire. So I didn't have enough stomach acid to break down any meat that I was eating. So every time I would get to my menstrual cycle, when my iron would drop, I'd be really fatigued and really not okay. And I'd have to supplement with iron. And I hate iron supplements. I just really don't like them. And it was only when I started working on pulling that digestive fire back and actually rebalancing all that now I can have meat. And I actually started craving it again to help pull my iron up and listening to my body. Whereas because it wasn't the fact I couldn't tolerate meat, it was just my body wasn't coping with breaking it down because the system wasn't coping with taking in that food.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so the cause was the stress, not the food.
Exactly.
And we don't want to blame the food.
Exactly.
Anyone who's ever been married knows how easy it is to blame the partner when the partner's not the cause. So it's that, psychological pattern is reflected in everything: our food, our exercise, our relationships, our sleep, everything. Humans, and this isn't criticism of humans, it's just something we all deal with. We have a tendency to blame things that aren't the problem. And when it comes to our health, we do that. And when it comes to our health, that can be dangerous for us. So we want to place accountability where it needs to be placed. And that can really help us restore our sense of well-being.
Yeah.
Even though in the moment you don't want to, you might not want to, accountability might not feel so good, but in the moment it doesn't. But the effect is wonderful if you go through it.
It's really funny because I had with my coach today and we were talking about this. We were talking about like when you get angry and go into conflict, right? But I feel it's really fitting for this conversation because it's okay to go into conflict, but we're so scared of it or facing what's happening on a deeper level because we don't know how to mend it. So it's when we're like open to finding what's the breakdown in the system and then coming in to mend it, that then we're stronger to go into the conflict. And then you can be more open to the rage and the stress and everything and just go all in, and not have to look for that blame or anything and just get out what you need to say and then come back and look for that mending. And I feel it ties in nicely with Ayurvedic principles because you're just getting out what's on the surface and then you're going to come back and see what you need to do to actually repair what's happening at that deeper level.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Ayurveda is all about. I feel like a lot of people intuitively grasp that. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. It's just really hard. And that's usually what you come up against, like in the clinic, is, most people genuinely want to heal and get better. And it's to do that, to actually go through a healing process and not just put a Band-Aid over it or just kind of temporarily erase the symptom, is challenging. And it requires a deeper look at, is it worth it? Is it worth it to eat these foods that bring me pleasure but make me sick? And am I even willing to admit that it's that? Am I even willing to admit that this job that brings me so many benefits is also making me sick? That's a scary thing to admit. And that doesn't mean you have to quit your job and all that stuff. Most of the time, it doesn't require a gigantic overhaul. It requires intentional modification in strategic ways. And that requires often hard conversations with people and yourself. And that's what people tend to shy away from. But, on the whole, once someone agrees to do that with themselves, not me, they agree to themselves to do it, they never look back. I mean, they feel so much better when they address the real issues, even though there's some turbulence at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's always to do with that when you start to dive in, and it's almost like picking at a scab, right? It's like you have to kind of rip it off or pulling a Band-Aid off because there is going to be some pain there as you start to unpack and get light shone on the aspects of your life you've kind of been burying and hiding. But once they're out of the closet, it's just like, oh, okay, I can be myself again and I can come back to more authentically who I am, and then look at how to rebalance and actually listen to my body and see what aligns for me and what doesn't align for me. So my question that's urging in my head is, so with Ayurvedic principles, what are some recommendations that you recommend to people that come in to help readjust their diet or look at rebalancing their system so there is balance again?
Well, one of the great things about Ayurveda is that the conversation is different with every person, and Ayurveda has thousands of principles, and not all of them apply to everyone. So the job of the Ayurvedic doctor is to know what principles apply to that person in that moment. And I'm a big believer that there's no such thing as a 5-minute Ayurvedic consultation. It's very important for someone to sit down and be able to tell their story and express what they feel is going on. And most people aren't medical professionals, so that doesn't mean that telling their story they need to understand the ins and outs of how their disease pathology works. But it's important for the trust between the practitioner and the client, we can call them, that they feel seen and heard. I mean, that's integral. What kind of relationship can blossom without the other person feeling seen and heard, whether it's friendship, romance, professional, anything? So that's a very important part of the process. And that's missing in a lot of allopathic dynamics these days.
Yeah.
And it has a direct impact on how well a person follows a protocol. And motivation is part of the healing situation. So motivation is not just a willpower based thing. A lot of people think that motivation is, I'll do it, I can do it, and I'll just kind of push myself into doing it. And unless someone has extremely tremendous willpower, which is 1 out of 1,000 people, motivation is much trickier, and it requires a much more navigation than people think. Oftentimes our genuine motivations are hidden from us. And so, like, for example, typically, let's say someone has a chronic disease, whether it's pain or weight or blood sugar or whatever it is, skin issues, any chronicity is involved. It's very rare that that's going to get turned around in a week. It's going to be a bit of a journey to improve those tissues and restore their function and all that stuff. And so motivation is a key factor when you have to do something for 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And motivation is a changing landscape. So every week there are going to be different boosts and drains on that person's motivation. And it's extremely helpful in a healing process for that person to talk to someone about what's going on motivationally and what the big drains on their motivation are and what's keeping them going. Because there's an exercise I ask all my new Ayurveda students to do almost at the beginning of their training, which is interview about 5 people and ask them what number on their list of priorities health is. And most people just out of the gate will say, 3, 2, 4, 1. And then I give the students a list of questions that are much more detailed. And it turns out that, when you actually break it down, most people have health as maybe a number 8 or 9 priority. And that's an issue because without health, we tend to be quite miserable.
Yeah.
So part of Ayurveda is helping someone understand how to authentically and naturally, without faking it, get health from a number 8 to a number 3 on their priority list. It does not have to be number 1, but it needs to be in the top 5, in my opinion.
Well, also, like, a lot of people are like, I've got to work, I've got to earn money. It's like, well, if you don't actually look after your health, then your wealth's not going to help you on the other side either, because it's not going to stop you from dying or stop you from going into the extreme chronic conditions or anything like that, because you need to put that time in to actually invest in your health and look after it. And I find too, from coming from that position of owning a company and from like a high stressful situation where I was surviving. Like, I was going to a naturopath every week because I was keeping my health to a point where I could keep functioning. But then I'm still, like, 2 years on, I'm still feeling the symptoms coming out as my body's trying to return to homeostasis. And this is when I'm doing all the work now to ensure that my health is at its priority. And a lot of people don't realize that. Like, they'll get to that crisis point, right? And then come find you or come find an alternative practitioner, and they're already in crisis. And then when they get to a point where they're okay, instead of continuing to maintain their health or make sure that their health stays at a state that, is supporting a healthy immune system and everything like that, they just kind of fall off the wagon again and think it'll be okay. So it's like really that long-term mindset, right?
Yeah, definitely. And, it is work to maintain health for most people. But the value of it, I mean, look, even if you look at it from a monetary standpoint, which obviously is not the only reason I like to look at it, but that's important, right? And it's not talked about enough, how important that situation is. But it's a very real topic that people actually care about. It is extremely expensive to be sick.
Mm-hmm.
Productivity drops. Mm-hmm. You might even lose your job in severe cases, right? Costs of medicine, time away from work, all the extra things you have to do. And so, the list goes on, right?
Yeah.
And just from a financial perspective, it is way more financially beneficial to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one of the reasons. So, it's very common that people, there was a study done that interviewed a bunch of people in their 70s and 80s and asked them about what their primary regrets were in life. And number one on that list for a lot of people was, I wish I had stayed healthier. I wish I had taken better care of my health. So, that is taking wisdom from people who have been through it and looking back on their life and saying, yeah, was it really worth it for me to, go into this like insanely stressful situation for long periods of time to get a 10% raise and the status and everything that comes along with it. But it meant that I was hospitalized in my 50s, and I lost the job anyways.
Yeah. Exactly.
10 years later, whatever it is. But, that's a common story, not like an outlier story.
Yeah.
And I think culturally we need to start really looking at our health as one of our greatest treasures, as opposed to this thing that we can just kind of use up until it's gone, and hopefully it doesn't go away until we're really old. But that's a myth. In the States, 80% of people, by the time they're 50 years old, 80% of people have at least one chronic disease.
Wow.
So, so people are using up their health by their 30s and 40s, if not earlier.
Yeah.
And that's not good. It's not good. It's not worth it.
No, and we're meant to be, have all these access to things that are meant to make our lives longer. Like we're meant to be striving to more longevity and things like that. But if your health is that deteriorating by the time you're 50, you've like kind of reach midlife, right? And then like you said, you've used up all your health already. So what's the other half of your life going to be like if you do make it to that 100 mark or the 90 mark or whatever it's like? And wouldn't you rather be vibrant and healthy and be ready to take on the world because you've done all the hard work instead of sitting there and trying to manage all your health conditions. Like you said, it's that financial, but also the time commitment, and what else are you missing out on because you're not investing and making health a priority.
Yeah, and Ayurveda literally translates, the word Ayurveda literally translates to the science of longevity. And longevity is not defined as living more years. It's defined as living more years with all your senses and functions intact.
Mm.
So that's a much better definition of health, in my opinion, than what a lot of people have floating around in the back of their heads, which is just I'm healthy until I'm sick.
Yeah.
Because those years of 50s, 60s, 70s, all that stuff, those are the wisdom years where you have tons of life experience, and oftentimes you'll be enjoying your older children or your grandchildren or all that stuff, which take on, one of the main motivations for a lot of my clients in their 50s and 60s to get healthy is to have a better relationship with their children and family.
Yeah.
Which is huge. I mean, that's the natural priority shift as someone ages, typically. Not for everybody, but for the majority of people.
Mm.
And if you don't have your health at that time, you regret it. What can I say? I mean, that's what people say. That's what they report. They regret it. They said, why did I do that? So, but the good news is, if you're already there in that stage of regret, there is so much you can do to reverse whatever issue you have. I mean, obviously there are some issues that are tougher than nails and can't be worked on really, but for the most part, most issues can be made completely better, if not 90% better, if not 80% better. And that means an 80%, 90% boost in quality of life.
Exactly.
And that's what Ayurveda really cares about, is quality of life.
Yeah, which is such an important thing to think about because, as we go through this life, we're so distracted by all the shiny things, I want to say. I just keep seeing phones in my mind's eye, but, we're distracted by all these other things where we forget that, it's our health and our relationships and our connections that is really what we should be treasuring and coming back to, because that is what's going to give us a better quality of life rather than what's coming through a screen or this status that we need to find, or for whatever reason, it's not being judgmental. It's just, where do your priorities want to lie? And when you're on your deathbed, what will you look back on and go, oh, I should have, maybe I should have spent more time with my family, or should I have spent more time on a screen? It comes down to that sometimes too.
Yeah, and the motivations are different for each person, and
exactly.
So we've been talking about kind of common motivations, but motivation is tricky. There are altruistic motivations, there are very selfish motivations, and I don't think selfish motivations are bad. There are people who just don't want to go through the pain of sickness, and I think that's a fantastic motivation.
Agreed.
Right, and so, in an Ayurvedic consultation, the goal is to discover what the genuine motivations are for that individual, not what they should be, not, what someone else says or thinks it might be, but, an exploration of, hey, what actually is getting me up out of bed, Ayurvedic doctor. They'll even know what to do if your motivation for getting out of bed is to drink coffee and eat donuts.
Yeah.
Because, hey, motivational energy,
yeah,
it can be used. It can be used for a productive health benefit if you know what to do, if you know how to leverage it.
Yeah.
So, if someone says, yeah, I love my kids and that's all great and that's what you're supposed to say and on, but really why they're getting out of bed is for the coffee and donuts, great, let's work with it.
It's so true because...
I'm certainly not going to judge you.
I know, exactly. But it's so true because I get up like an hour before my child will get up because I want my alone time and I want time to do things that I want to do before I have to enter into mum mode or coach mode or whatever mode I have to go in for the next, rest of the day. And, we use this word selfish, but it's actually being self-full, because you need to, have motivations for yourself. And like you said, if it's coffee and donuts, so be it. That's your intrinsic motivation. That's your habit. And that's what's going to help you build other habits around that, because that's what you want to get to. It's like, it's not saying that we don't love our children. It's actually just saying, I want to show my child that I love myself enough that I'm going to look after my health and do things that I enjoy, so that they can grow up that way as well and have that role model of, okay, it's okay to put yourself first and then let everything else happen with that.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's like you said. I mean, kids mimic that. You can say, do as I say, not as I do, but good luck with that.
Exactly.
But yes, exactly. It's self-full is a much better way of saying it. Selfish is a loaded term that I don't like when you're using it in a healing context.
Yeah.
But the point being is that we have many facets to our psyche, and they are not always in perfect harmony with each other, like, what people like to think. They conflict, they clash, so navigating all that is key to, okay, so like I have many clients that I work with for metabolic issues and diabetes and things like that. And one thing I never do with them ever is say, okay, here's a list of all the things you need to do, and good luck. But the thing is, that's what people ask for. They say, just tell me everything I need to do and I'll do it. It's like, no, you won't. And it's not fair for you to expect yourself that you will. Um, it's it needs to be a step-by-step process for it to be successful. And I tried for 10 years doing it the first way. I said, okay, here's like a list of 10 things you need to do. Don't eat this, do eat this, take these herbs, do this exercise, all that stuff, blah, 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 blah. And it would fail every time, almost every time. 9 out of 10 times it would fail. And then I completely switched to doing things one step at a time, but not baby steps. I hate that term, baby steps. Baby steps means I'm not going to do it. No, one real step at a time. And the success rate went through the roof. I mean, it went from 10% success to 90% success.
Yeah.
To the point where people were saying, no, give me more, I can handle it. And I would have to actually argue with them and say, no, I'm not going to give you more to do. You need to keep doing everything else you're doing, but just change this one thing until next week or the next 3 days, whatever. And, it was kind of a funny reversal. But that's the way the human mind and body work together. And, yes, of course, like I said before, there are those rare exceptions.
Yeah.
But it's rare.
Yeah. And it's so funny, because I tell my coaching clients the same thing. Just pick one thing to focus on for a week and see and integrate that in. And then next week we'll talk about the next thing to add in, and then the next thing to add in. Because like you said, our minds can't cope with doing everything at once. And we forget that, it's like that saying that we underestimate what we can do in a year, but overestimate what we can do in a day, right? So it's like, I want to try and jam it all in really, really quickly, instead of stretching out and realizing it's a long-term game, not a short-term game.
Yeah, and it's that's not really everyone's fault. There are a lot of cultural things coming into play there that have influenced us since we were born, which is, this idea that health is, if I just find the right lever to pull, I can fix my health. It's really not that simple. And that the problem is there are some issues that are like that. There are some issues where you can just take a pill and it goes away. But maybe, 1 out of 50 is like that. The vast majority of issues require a much more sophisticated strategy and path to recovering and healing. And we don't want that because we don't want to be sick, so we get impatient, which is quite understandable. But at the same time as understanding that, we also have to keep in mind that we have to be effective
Yeah.
and that we have to do what it takes and not what we wish it were, in order to restore health.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that perspective too, because often it is like with like that immediate response. What is, I can't remember the term, but it's where, you know, you want the quick fix, right? You want the quick hit, you know, like, oh, I can buy this now. I don't have to pay for it yet, but I'll forget that I have to, Afterpay, PayPal, all those payment schemes and things are the same thing, right? It's like, oh, we can get it now, even though we have to pay it off, and I don't know where that money will come from then, but it's okay, we can have it now. It's like that kind of like, if we can get it happening right now, then, it'll be great, rather than, okay, maybe I need to save for that, or maybe I need to, slowly put things in place so that that can actually happen for me. It's that immediate, like you said, that cultural feedback, that society impact as well, that we want something right here, right now, rather than putting in the long term to actually make sure that it happens later and longer, for that longevity, again coming back to that Ayurvedic term.
Yeah, and there are that attitude. It's actually incredible how many parallels there are, or matches between the psychological pattern around how someone deals with money
Yeah.
and health.
Yeah.
Those two things are highly connected, to the point where someone who is practiced or has seen it a lot can make pretty accurate health conclusions about a person just by looking at their spending habits.
How interesting. How interesting.
And yeah, and so those two things in the mind are very tied, and that's why the health industry, the supplement industry, the pharmaceutical industry are raking it in, because they know how to. I mean, there's a popular thing right now going around where they're in the health world or the supplement world. It's this video, and it's like, I'm going to tell you 4 things you can do in the next 20 minutes that are going to completely change your health, and you're not going to have to diet. And coming up, and then they lead you down this breadcrumb. They put all these breadcrumbs out, and you follow it. And by the time you're done, it's like, okay, so for $99.99, I'm going to finally give you the 4 ingredients. If you are watching one of those, just stop and turn it off, because it is not going to restore your health. But we are, all of us, including myself, we're suckers for it.
Mm-hmm.
We want the supplement that fixes the thing.
Mm-hmm.
We want the pill that fixes the thing.
Yeah.
And it's just not how the body works. And it never will be. I mean, there's the Ozempic craze going on, and there's a new pill coming out that's instead of an injection, it's a pill. And yes, it will do what it says it does, but at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
And so I encourage anyone who's thinking about doing that to look up the side effects.
And also the ingredients would be the other part, because it's funny, because a lot of pharmaceutical medications are made to mimic things in nature, so our body actually doesn't break it down as well. But that's a whole other conversation, which we won't go into, because we'll be here for another hour. So as we finish our time together, Victor, if there was something that you could heal or change in the world, what would it be?
Well, okay. I think what it would actually be an attitude that people carry towards their health.
Yeah.
So accountability is a hard thing, and getting sick is not, whether we're sick or healthy, is not completely in our control.
Yeah.
But it is largely in our control for most people. Even if you were born with problems, there's still a lot that most people can do to make it better. And so, but there's an attitude that, it's not my fault, so I shouldn't have to do anything about it.
The victim mindset.
And while it's very true that it's not your fault, it's still your problem. And I say that with as much compassion as I can convey via an electronic medium. But once a person can cross that bridge from, okay, regardless of whose fault it is, whether it's my parents being unhealthy and so I had a birth defect, or I've done it to myself but I don't really want to admit that because, our food sucks. And so how could I possibly be healthy? No matter what it is, um, say, okay, yeah, it's Dr. Bill's fault. It's my mom's fault. It's my fault, even if you agree it's your own fault. It's like, okay, fine. But what am I going to do to address this problem I have? Is a much healthier attitude to take, regardless of whose fault it was.
Yeah.
And I think that one shift would really change how everyone treated their own body.
And each other as well, not just their own body, but each other. Like, rather than, and it's like owning yourself, isn't it? Like, just really coming back to, this is what an accepting that's what's happened to you, and that you're going to make a change now.
Yeah, and not to downplay how difficult that is. That can be very, very difficult.
Yeah, agreed.
But it's still what it is. So yes, I mean, someone can say, well, you're asking me to do something really hard. It's like, yes I am. I'm asking you to do something really hard for your own benefit and for all of our benefits, because one person's health has a huge ripple effect. A vital person positively, just their vitality alone, positively impacts tons of people. Tons. Walking around, feeling, looking, and expressing health and vitality and happiness has a huge impact on other people.
Yeah.
That alone, not even speaking a word.
Yeah. And I often... from working with a lot of my background's in speech language pathology, and working with a lot of clients, like children and their mums, so often the mums will let their health go, and I would have to say to them in tough love, if you go down, what happens to the rest of the ship? Because a lot of people don't actually think of that way from a parental point of view, that if you're not well enough to look after yourself, who's going to look after the kids? Who's going to what's the flow on effect with that? And as a family dynamic, if you're a stay-at-home mum, stay-at-home dad, or if you both have to work and then you fall really ill, then what's that going to do to that family dynamic and that structure? So definitely what you said, like, coming to terms with that and changing that mindset and attitude is definitely an important part.
Yeah, it's huge. So that would be the one thing I would change.
Makes perfect sense to me. And how can people find you, Victor, if they want to come work with you or they want to find out more about you?
You can find me at my website, www.ayurveda.com, and if you wouldn't mind putting that in the show notes, because that's hard to spell.
I definitely will.
You can find me there. Easy to get a hold of me. I respond within a day.
Beautiful.
And I'm happy to work with anyone who needs health. And to find out whether Ayurveda is what you want to do, I'm happy to do like a 15-20 minute Zoom or phone call, no cost. Perfect. So that way you can feel safe and not like, one of those online breadcrumb following things. We'll just talk, and it's like, this is how it works, and if it's something you're interested in, then we can set up a plan.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to put all those details in the show notes for you as well, so that if anyone wants to connect with Victor, you can find his website. And if you want to take him up on that offer, or you're just curious, sometimes just follow that curiosity, right? And see where that leads, because having a conversation could be enough to change your health and change your life.
Definitely. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks. Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.